How are you guys doing? It is Monday, November 9th, 2020, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to take you through this weekend's biggest matchups, especially in football, whether it be in college, the NFL, and of course in international soccer, where of course overseas they refer to soccer as football as well. And also, I'm going to let you know what's going on today. Of course, there's football ending up of week 9 of the NFL, but of course, I'll get into that in a bit. So with everything said, I'm going to start with international soccer or international football. Starting with the Premier League in England, Manchester United was able to beat Everton 3-1 on Saturday. Bruno Fernandes, one of their newest additions from Portugal, he was able to score 2 goals. And Edinson Cavani, their newest addition from PSG, was able to score his first goal with the Reds as they were able to beat Everton 3-1. Right now, looking at the table, with this win, they're now sitting at 14th in the Premier League with 3 wins, a draw, and 3 losses. They have 10 they have 10 points in the table through 7 matches played. Also, continuing on, Chelsea was able to beat Sheffield United 4-1. Tammy Abraham was able to get the first goal, following Sheffield United's first goal to tie it up at 1. Chilwell, the English national, was able to score in the 34th minute. In the second half, it will be Thiago Silva, the former PSG Brazilian national. And then, of course, Timo Werner, their newest striker out of Germany, was able to score the 4th goal to help give Chelsea this win. Right now, looking at the Premier League, Chelsea sitting at 5th in the Premier League. They have 15 points through 8 matches. They have 4 wins, 3 draws, and a loss so far in their 8 games. Right now, they are trailing Southampton by a point, but that's where they're sitting at right now. Those are the games from Saturday. Looking to Sunday's English Premier League matchups, Tottenham Hotspur was able to beat West Brom in the 88th minute off of a goal from their elite striker Harry Kane. With this win, they are currently sitting 2nd in the Premier League, tied with Liverpool with 5 wins, 2 draws, and a loss to their 8 games. Speaking of Liverpool, they were able to draw with Manchester City 1-1. Mo Salah, the Liverpool elite winger, he would get the penalty goal, the PK goal in the 13th minute to put Liverpool up 1-0, and then it'll be Gabriel Jesus, the new number 9 from Manchester City, who would tie it up. And of course, with this draw, Liverpool drops to number 3, tied with Tottenham, like I just said. And with this draw, Man City is now 10th in the Premier League with 12 points in the table. They have 3 wins, 3 draws, and a loss to their name on the season. And then last but not least, Arsenal would end up losing 3-0 to Aston Villa. Watkins would score 2 goals for Aston Villa following Saka's own goal. With this loss, Arsenal drops to number 11 in the Premier League. They have 4 wins and 4 losses, no draws in 8 matches. They now have 12 points in the table. And right now, they have the same amount of points as Manchester City at the moment, as they've played 1 more game. So that's the Premier League. Jumping back to Saturday, jumping to the Bundesliga, the reigning Bundesliga champions Bayern Munich were able to beat Borussia Dortmund 3-2 in Der Klassiker, which is the biggest rivalry in all of Germany, which is the 2 best teams. In this matchup, first, Marco Reus who scored the first goal for Borussia Dortmund, as David Alaba, Bayern Munich's fullback, would score off of a free kick in the first half in extra time to tie it up at 1. In the second half, Robert Lewandowski's header would put Bayern up 2-1, and Leroy Sané, after being subbed in, would get the breakaway goal to put Bayern up 3-1. And then Erling Braut Haaland, the elite striker for Borussia Dortmund, would end up getting the goal in the 83rd minute to make it 3-2, and they wouldn't be able to come back following that. With this win, Bayern Munich was able to get a really big win over Borussia Dortmund, and with this win, Bayern Munich now sits at number 1 in the Bundesliga with 6 wins and only 1 loss in the season. And with this loss, Borussia Dortmund drops to 3rd in the Bundesliga with 5 wins and 2 losses on the season. They have 15 points in the table compared to Bayern Munich's 18. And that's really what the Bundesliga is looking like right now. And of course, second place in the Bundesliga belongs to RB Leipzig, who was able to beat SC Freiburg 3-0 as Konate and Angelino would score, as Sabitzer would score on a penalty kick to, of course, give RB Leipzig the win. RB Leipzig is sitting 2nd. They said they have 1 more point in the table than Borussia Dortmund, and they're 2 points behind Bayern Munich in total in the table. Continuing on, looking on to Italian Serie A, jumping to Sunday's matchups, because those were the big matchups, of course, in the Serie A. Juventus was able to tie with Lazio, or tie at 1. Cristiano Ronaldo would get the first goal for Juventus in the 15th minute, as he's been kind of electric since he's been back And then Caicedo would end up tying it up for Lazio in the 95th minute, 5 minutes into extra time. And of course, with this, both teams would eventually draw. And looking at both teams right now, Juventus is sitting at number 5 in Serie A with 3 wins and 4 draws, 0 losses so far. They have 13 points in their table. That's 4 points behind AC Milan. And Lazio, with this draw, they now have 11 points in the table, as they now have 3 wins, 2 draws, and 2 losses on the season in Serie A. Speaking of AC Milan was able to tie with Hellas Verona. Zlatan Ibrahimovic, their former all-time great, and of course, who just rejoined them after playing with LA Galaxy. He was able to score in the 3rd minute of extra time after Hellas Verona took a 2-0 lead. AC Milan was able to tie it up in the very last minute, and with this draw, they are now sitting at the top of the Serie A with 5 wins and 2 draws so far, with 17 points in Italian Serie A. And that's what Italian soccer is looking like at the moment. Jumping to French soccer, jumping to Ligue 1, just to show you what's going on, of course, in that league. PSG was able to beat Stade Rennes 3-0. Moise Kean, the young striker who played for Juventus and Everton for a bit, he was able to score in the 11th minute. And then Angel Di Maria, their center attacking mid, was able to score in the 21st and 73rd minutes to give PSG the big win over Stade Rennes. And currently looking at PSG in the Ligue 1 table, they are currently leading that table. They have 8 wins and 2 losses on the season. They have 24 points in the table, which is 5 points higher than second place Lille, who in Stade Rennes, who is now sitting at 3rd in Ligue 1 after losing their 2nd game of the season to PSG. So that's what that's looking like. And currently looking out to La Liga in Spain. FC Barcelona, they would beat Real Betis 5-2. Ousmane Dembele would score the first goal for them. Antoine Griezmann, after the score was tied at 1, his goal off of the Messi assist would help put them up 2-1, and then Lionel Messi would score in the 61st minute to make it 3-1. Moron would score for Real Betis after one of their players was pulled for being red carded. That would be following Messi's penalty kick. And then Messi would score in the 82nd minute, and then Pedri would score in the 90th minute to help Barcelona beat Real Betis 5-2 in this matchup. Right now, currently looking at the La Liga with this win, FC Barcelona is now 8th in the table, as they currently have 7 matches played. They have 3 wins, 2 losses, and 2 draws, which puts them at 11 points right now, sitting in the table. And then also Atletico Madrid was able to beat Cádiz 4-0. Their young Portuguese forward João Felix scored 2 goals, and their elite striker Luis Suarez scored in the 51st minute to help them get their biggest win over. One of their biggest wins of the season. Atletico Madrid, with this win, with 7 matches played, they have 5 wins and 2 draws. They are sitting at 2nd in La Liga. They have 3 points behind the first place team, Real Sociedad, but Sociedad has played 3 more games than them, so Atletico Madrid is on pace to eventually surpass them. And so that's what La Liga was looking like on Saturday. And then jumping to yesterday's matchups, the biggest one for La Liga would become where Real Madrid would lose to Valencia 4-1. Karim Benzema would score the only goal for Real Madrid, and Rafael Varane would be the other Real Madrid player to score, but it would be an own goal. And then Soler would score 3 goals for Valencia. He would score a hat-trick all off penalties. Big win for Valencia as they beat Real Madrid. With this loss, Real Madrid is now sitting at 4th in La Liga with 16 points in the table through 8 matches with 5 wins, a draw, and 2 losses. And, of course, with this win, Valencia now jumps up to 9th in La Liga with 11 points in the table through 9 matches played. They have 3 wins, 2 draws, and 4 losses. Right now, that is what this weekend of soccer is currently looking like at the moment. Now jumping into college football's matchups from the ranked opponents from this weekend, starting with Friday's matchups. 9th ranked BYU was able to beat 21st ranked Boise State 51-17. Currently looking at to how BYU fared. Their quarterback Zach Wilson with over 359 yards and 2 touchdowns on the day. On the ground, their running back Tyler Algier would finish with 123 yards on the game and 2 touchdowns. And of course, he only had 4 yards. He had 127 total yards of offense. Gunnar Romney would be the leading receiver for BYU. He had 133 yards and 6 receptions. Dax Milne had 99 yards and 3 receptions. Isaac Rex had 2 touchdowns when he had 45 yards and 5 receptions. Big overall game for BYU, and they remain undefeated to beat Boise State for their first loss of the season. They're now 2-1 on the season. Their biggest performance will come from Khalil Shakir, who would have 139 yards and 10 receptions and 2 touchdowns. But with this win, like I said, Boise State is now 2-1, and BYU is now 8-0 on the season. And I imagine they're going to move up in the rankings. Also on that day, 11th ranked Miami was able to beat unranked NC State 6-1. De'Aaron King through the air was able to he was able to throw for 430 yards and 5 touchdowns, no picks. On the ground, he ran for 105 yards. He gave him a total of 535 total yards of offense for the Miami Hurricanes that day. And of course, their leading receiver would be Malik Harley, who would have 153 yards and 8 receptions and 2 touchdowns. With this win, Miami they're now 6-1 on the season, as NC State now drops to 4-3 officially on the season, as this game would end up being 44-41. Big win for Miami. Jumping into Saturday's matchup, starting with the top-ranked matchup of the day. 4th-ranked Notre Dame was able to be top-ranked Clemson without their elite quarterback Trevor Lawrence in the matchup. This would go all the way to overtime, as Notre Dame would win in second overtime to beat Clemson 47-40. Clemson's freshman quarterback, their backup quarterback, DJ Uiagalelei, he would throw for 439 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. The team was only able to get 34 yards on 33 carries on the ground today. Amazing running defense from Notre Dame. Cornell Powell and Amari Rodgers would both log over 100 yards of receiving. And on the defensive side of the ball, Balen Spector and Joseph Charleston were able to get 2 total tackles on the day. Looking at how Notre Dame fared, their quarterback Ian Book would throw for 310 yards on the day with a touchdown. And Kyron Williams on the ground would finish with 140 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also had -2 yards through the air to give him 138 yards, but he still had 3 touchdowns on the day. Javon McKinley had 102 yards on 5 receptions. And then, of course, Notre Dame was able to kind of bring it on defense as well. And with this 47-40 win, Notre Dame is now 7-0 on the season, 6-0 in the ACC. And with this loss, Clemson is now 7-1 on the season, 6-1 in the ACC. As they lost to number 4 Notre Dame, so I don't think they're going to drop very far in the rankings, but they are going to drop in the rankings. Continuing on, 3rd-ranked Ohio State was able to beat unranked Rutgers 49-27. Don't be fooled by the 27. 18 of their points came in the 4th quarter, but they were able to score off of some amazing trick plays. Looking at how Ohio State fared, their elite quarterback Justin Fields, I said elite because he has an elite profile. He completed 24 of his 28 passes, throwing for 314 yards. He also had 5 touchdowns. On the ground, he was able to get 7 yards on 6 carries and another touchdown to give him a total of 321 total yards of offense and 6 touchdowns on the day. Their leading receiver would be Garrett Wilson with 104 yards on 6 receptions and then a touchdown as well. And then they would also have an amazing defensive performance. And with this win, Ohio State is now 3-0 on the season and 3-0 in the Big Ten, and Rutgers now drops to 1-2 on the season. Continuing down the rankings, the 8th-ranked Florida Gators were able to beat the 5th-ranked Georgia Bulldogs in their Jacksonville rivalry game, their neutral site game that they play in every year, this time without fans. Florida was able to get a big win. They beat them 44-28, like I just said. Georgia wasn't able to get a lot going. In total, both their quarterbacks, Stetson Bennett and DeJuan Mathis, would complete 9 of their 29 passes for 2 touchdowns and 3 picks. Zamir White really had it going. He had 107 yards on 7 carries and a touchdown. But Florida was able to get it completely going. Their quarterback, Kyle Trask, would throw for 474 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a pick. On the ground, Damian Pierce would have 52 yards and 15 carries and a touchdown, and Malik Davis would lead the Gators with 100 yards on 5 receptions on the day. With this win, Florida is now 4-1 on the season, 4-1 in the SEC, and with this loss, UGA, the Georgia Bulldogs, now 4-2 and 4-2 in the SEC so far on the season. Going on down, 6th-ranked Cincinnati remains undefeated after beating Houston 38-10. As their quarterback Desmond Ridder would go over 162 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. And Jared Dokes would have 184 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Desmond Ridder their quarterback would run for 103 yards and 3 total touchdowns on the ground. That will give him a total of 265 yards of offense and 4 touchdowns on the day. With his win, they're now 6-0 on the season as Houston drops to 2-3. Seventh ranked Texas A&M was able to beat unranked South Carolina as they are now 5-1 under new coach Jimbo Fisher. Kellen Mond with over 4 touchdowns on the day as they were able to get a big win. Oregon in their first game of the season, 12th ranked Oregon would beat unranked Stanford in this matchup. Their quarterback Tyler Shuff would throw for 227 yards on the day with a touchdown, and also CJ Verdell was able to get 105 yards and 20 carries as Oregon ended up having 4 total touchdowns on the ground, one of them being from Tyler Show, their quarterback as well. With this win, they're now 1-0 as Stanford now is 0-1 after picking up their first loss of the season. Additionally, on 13th ranked Indiana was able to beat 23rd ranked Michigan 38-21 as they were kind of easily able to separate themselves from this team. Michael Penix Jr., their quarterback, would complete 30 of his 50 passes for 342 yards, throwing for 3 touchdowns total on the day as he was able to help them beat Michigan. Their quarterback Joe Milton would throw for 344 yards with 3 touchdowns and 2 picks. Indiana was able to make the most out of these opportunities, and with this win, they are 3-0 in the Big Ten, as Michigan is now 1-2 in the Big Ten. 14th ranked Oklahoma State was able to beat Kansas State in the final quarter, 20-18, as they would keep their undefeated status. Additionally, 15th ranked Coastal Carolina was able to beat unranked South Alabama 23-6. 16th ranked Marshall remained undefeated as they were to beat UMass 51-10 to remain 6-0 on the season. 17th ranked Iowa State was able to beat Baylor 38-31. As Iowa State quarterback Brock Purdy would throw for 164 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 3 picks. Breece Hall would have 133 yards on the ground, and he would have 27 yards through the air. He had 3 total touchdowns on the day to go on with those 160 total yards of offense as they were able to beat Baylor and give Baylor their 4th loss of the season so far. Continuing on down the rankings, 18th ranked SMU was able to pick up their 7th win of the season as they beat Temple 47-23. Shane Buechele, the former Texas quarterback, was able to throw for 355 yards and 4 touchdowns through the air. 19th ranked Oklahoma was able to beat Kansas, who hasn't won yet. Oklahoma was able to beat them 62-9. Spencer Rattler had 212 yards and 1 touchdown through the air. As on the ground, Oklahoma was able to get 6 rushing touchdowns. And their biggest rusher on the day was Ramondre Stevenson, who had 104 yards and 11 carries and 2 touchdowns on the day. And Spencer Rattler was also able to add a touchdown on the ground to give him 2 total touchdowns on the day to go with his 215 total yards of offense. Of course, moving on down the list, 20th ranked USC was able to get their first win of the season as they beat Arizona State on a come-from-behind victory led by Kelvin Slovis, their new quarterback, throwing for 381 yards and 2 touchdowns. 22nd ranked Texas was able to beat unranked West Virginia 17-13, as this game would be scoreless in the 4th quarter, but Texas would they would hold on to win. And 25th ranked Liberty was able to beat unranked Virginia Tech 38-35 in a very close game. As in this game, it would come down to Malik Willis throwing for 217 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he also ran for 108 yards and a touchdown on the ground. That would give him a total of 325 total yards and 4 touchdowns. Big win for the Liberty Flames and Virginia Tech. That's their 3rd loss of the season. That is what college football looked like following this weekend. And then last but not least, jumping into the NFL, jumping into Week 9 following the Thursday night matchup in which the Packers beat the 49ers. Starting with the early games, the Atlanta Falcons were able to beat the Denver Broncos 34-27 to get their 3rd win of the season and their first win at home. Starting off with the Broncos, their quarterback Drew Lock would throw for 313 yards for 2 touchdowns and a pick. He also had 47 total yards on the ground to give him 360 yards on the day. He also had a touchdown, giving him 3 touchdowns of total offense. Through the air, Jerry Jeudy would be his leading receiver with 125 yards on 7 receptions and a touchdown. And then on defense, Josey Jewell would be the leading tackler for Denver as he had 10 total tackles on the day. And on defense, Justin Simmons would end up getting the only interception for Denver. Speaking of interceptions, for the Atlanta Falcons, their lead quarterback Matt Ryan would complete 25 of his 35 passes for 284 yards, throwing for 3 touchdowns and a pick on the day as he was able to help the Falcons get this big win. On the ground, their leading rusher was their elite running back Todd Gurley II, who had 53 yards on 19 carries and a touchdown. Through the air, Olamide Zaccheaus would be the leading receiver for the Falcons as Calvin Ridley was out this week. Zaccheaus had 103 yards on 4 receptions and a touchdown. One of his receptions being a 51-yarder from Matt Ryan to put the Falcons above. Also, their elite wide receiver Julio Jones would finish with 54 yards on 5 receptions and a touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, Foyesade Olokun would lead the team in tackles. He had 10 of them on the day. He also had a sack as well. In addition, and he would get the only sack of the day for the team. And then their safety, Ricardo Allen, would get the only interception of the day for the Atlanta Falcons. With this win, the Falcons are 3-6 on the season, and the Denver Broncos now drop to 3-5 in their division. Jumping to Buffalo, the Buffalo Bills were able to beat the Seattle Seahawks 44-34 in Buffalo. For the Seahawks, their elite quarterback, Russell Wilson, would complete 28 of his 41 passes with 390 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks on the day. And he was also able to add 5 yards on the ground with a touchdown and give him 395 yards of total offense and 3 touchdowns. Through the air, DK Metcalf was able to be their leading receiver. He had 108 yards and 7 receptions and a touchdown. And also Russell Wilson was able to lose 2 fumbles. He had 3 total touchdowns and 4 turnovers, possibly that's probably his worst performance on the season so far, but he's still been playing amazing. On the defense side of the ball, Quinton Dunbar, Trey Flowers, and their elite linebacker, Bobby Wagner, would lead the team with 6 tackles each. Wagner also had a sack on the day. Jamal Adams, their elite safety, would finish with 5 tackles and a sack and a half on the day. And Jaron Reed would have 4 tackles. He'd have 2.5 sacks for the Seahawks. They had 7 total tackles as a team. And looking at how the Buffalo Bills fared, their quarterback Josh Allen would complete 31 of his 38 passes, throwing for 415 yards and 3 touchdowns. On the ground, he was also able to add 14 yards and a touchdown to give him 429 yards and 4 touchdowns on the day. Through the air, Stephon Diggs would be their leading receiver. He had 118 yards on 9 receptions, and also John Brown had 99 yards on 8 receptions. On the defensive side of the ball for the Buffalo Bills, A.J. Klein and Tre'Davious White would be the 2 players that recovered Russell Wilson's fumbles. As Tremaine Edmonds, their elite linebacker, he would finish with 11 total tackles on the day with a sack and 2.5 tackles for loss. A.J. Klein would end up with 5 tackles, and in addition to his fumble recovery, he would have 2 total sacks as well. Big game, of course, for him on the defensive side of the ball. Tre'Davious White and Jordan Poyer would be the 2 players that ended up with interceptions on the day. Tre'Davious White, in addition to his fumble recovery and his interception, was able to have 8 total tackles on the day, one of them being a tackle for loss. Great overall game for him as well. And with this win, the Buffalo Bills are now 7-2 in the AFC East. And with this loss, the Seattle Seahawks now drop to 6-2 in the NFC West. Continuing on to Indianapolis, the Colts were able to take this, they were able to get their third loss of the season as they lost to the Baltimore Ravens. Looking at how the Colts fared, their quarterback Phillip Rivers would throw for 227 yards and an interception. Through the air, their leading receiver will be Michael Pittman Jr. out of USC, who had 56 yards and 4 receptions. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Darius Leonard, their elite linebacker, would finish with 15 total tackles on the day, one of them being for loss, and he was also able to recover a fumble on the day. He had a pretty big game, of course, because he's one of their elite defensive talents. And then looking at how the Baltimore Ravens fared, their elite quarterback, reigning MVP Lamar Jackson, would complete 19 of his 23 passes, throwing for 170 yards, and then on the ground he'd have 58 yards on 13 carries and a touchdown, and that would give him a total of 228 total yards of offense with 1 touchdown, his only touchdown being his touchdown on the ground. Through the air, their leading receiver would be Nick Boyle, who had 46 yards on 4 receptions. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Malik Harrison would end up with 11 total tackles on the day that would lead the team. Chuck Clark would get the only fumble recovery of the day as he had 2 tackles of his own. And continuing on, their corner Marcus Peters would end up getting the only interception of the day. Their elite corner Marcus Peters, and with this win, the Baltimore Ravens are now 6-2 on the season, 4-0 on the road. And with this loss, the Indianapolis Colts are now 5-3 as they picked up their first loss at home. Jumping to Jacksonville, the Jaguars were able to lose to the Houston Texans. The Texans beat them 27-25, despite the Jaguars' chance to try to beat them in the fourth quarter. They were unable to do so, as this game came down to their final possession, and they failed their 2-point conversion in an attempt to tie up the game. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, their quarterback Jake Luton would throw for 304 yards and a touchdown and a pick. On the ground, their running back James Robinson would have 99 yards on 25 carries and a touchdown. And through the air, DJ Chark Jr. would be their leading receiver. He had 146 yards on 7 receptions and a touchdown, doing the most of what he could. On the defensive side of the ball, Miles Jack, their linebacker, would finish with 11 tackles on the day. Devon Hamilton would end up with a recovered fumble, as he also had 1 tackle on the day. And looking at the Houston Texans fare, their elite quarterback Deshaun Watson would complete 19 of his 32 passes for 281 yards and 2 touchdowns. On the ground, he was also able to get 50 yards there, as he was able to combine for 331 total yards of offense. Through the air, Will Fuller V was able to finish with 100 yards on 5 receptions and a touchdown as he led the team. And Brandon Cooks had 83 yards and 3 receptions and a touchdown. Big game overall from the Houston receivers, as Deshaun Watson was able to get it there. Then on the defensive side of the ball, Tyrell Adams would finish with 12 total tackles on the day as he led the team. Zach Cunningham, their linebacker out of Vanderbilt, finished with 7 total tackles and a sack on the day. And their corner, Vernon Hargreaves III, would finish with an interception. And with this win, the Houston Texans are now 2-6 on the season, as the Jacksonville Jaguars now drop to 1-7 so far. Continuing on, jumping to Nashville, the Tennessee Titans were able to beat the Chicago Bears 24-17. As this game would go on to the fourth quarter, the Bears would score all of their 17 points in the fourth quarter, but it wouldn't be enough as the Tennessee Titans basically held on to get this win. For the Chicago Bears, their quarterback Nick Foles would throw for 335 yards and 2 touchdowns. Through the air, Allen Robinson II would finish with 81 yards on 7 receptions to lead the team. Jimmy Graham had 55 yards and 6 receptions and a touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, Roquan Smith, their linebacker, would lead the team in tackles. He had 11 tackles, and he had 1 sack and another tackle for loss. Mario Edwards Jr. was also able to grab a sack as well. Looking at how the Tennessee Titans fared, their quarterback Ryan Tannehill would complete 10 of his 21 passes for 158 yards and 2 touchdowns. On the ground, their elite running back Derrick Henry would finish with 68 yards and 21 carries. And through the air, their leading receiver would be A.J. Brown out of Ole Miss, who had 101 yards on 4 receptions and a touchdown. And then Desmond King II and Jeffrey Simmons would both recover fumbles on the day. Jayon Brown would be the leading tackler for the Titans. He had 10 total tackles on the day, one of them being a sack. And with this win, the Tennessee Titans are now 6-2 on the season, 4-1 at home. And with this loss, the Chicago Bears are now 5-4 on the season, as they came very close to winning this one. Jumping to Kansas City, Missouri, the defending 2020 Super Bowl champs were able to beat the Carolina Panthers 33-31, as this game came down to the wire at the very end. But Kansas City was able to hold on and win as they were able to hold on following the Christian McCaffrey touchdown to win by 2, as Carolina attempted an onside kick and they were unable to recover it. Looking at how the Carolina Panthers fared in the game, their quarterback Teddy Bridgewater, he would complete 36 of his 49 passes, throwing for 310 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was also able to add 19 yards on the ground to give him in a touchdown to give him 329 total yards of offense and 3 touchdowns. The running back Christian McCaffrey, in his first game back from injury, he would finish with 69 rushing yards and 18 carries and a touchdown. He was also able to add 82 yards on 10 receptions and an additional touchdown. That would give him a total of 151 yards on the day, with 2 touchdowns, of course, on 28 touches for the Panthers. Also, Curtis Samuel was also able to add 105 yards on 9 receptions and a touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, Sam Franklin and Shaq Thompson would lead the team in tackles. They both had 7 of them. Sam Franklin would have a sack. He would have the only sack of the day for the Carolina Panthers. And looking out to how the Kansas City Chiefs fared, their elite quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, would complete 30 of his 45 passes, throwing for 372 yards and 4 touchdowns. Not much going on the ground for them. They were only able to get 30 total yards of rushing on 12 carries. But through the air, their elite tight end, Travis Kelce, would finish with 159 yards and 10 receptions. Their elite wide receiver, Tyreek Hill, would finish with 113 yards on 9 receptions, and 2 of them being touchdowns. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Daniel Sorensen would lead the team in tackles. He'd have 10 of them. Tyrann Mathieu would finish with 6. And with this win, the Kansas City Chiefs are now 8-1 on the season, 4-1 at home. And with this loss, the Carolina Panthers are now 3-6, dropping below the Atlanta Falcons for the worst. They're tied now with the Atlanta Falcons for the worst record in the NFC South. Jumping out to the NFC East and jumping out to DC. The Washington football team hosted the New York Giants, and the Giants were able to beat the Washington football team 23-20, despite Washington's attempt to come back in the second half. The Giants were able to take a 20-3 lead in the first half, and then Washington just wasn't able to come back from that. For Washington, their quarterback Alex Smith would complete 24 of his 32 passes, throwing for 325 yards, a touchdown, and 3 picks on the day. Kyle Allen would eventually come in. He would complete 5 of his 7 passes for 62 yards, but it wouldn't be enough. Through the air, Terry McLaurin would be their leading receiver. He had 115 yards on 7 receptions and a touchdown. Also, Cam Sims finished with 110 yards on 3 receptions. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Cameron Curl would finish with 11 total tackles on the day. He had a sack on the day. And then also their elite young defensive end, Chase Young, would finish with 1 tackle on the day. That 1 tackle of the day being a sack. They had 5 total sacks on the day as a team. And jumping out to how the New York Giants fared. Their quarterback, Daniel Jones, with over 212 yards and a touchdown on the day. And he would also add 4 yards on the ground. Their leading rusher was Wayne Gallman, who had 68 yards on 14 carries and a touchdown. Also, Alfred Morris, the former a former member of the Washington football team when they were known as the Washington Redskins. He finished with 67 yards on 9 carries on the day. And through the air, Austin Mack would be the leading receiver. He had 72 yards on 4 receptions and a touchdown, as Evan Ingram had the only receiving touchdown on the day for the New York Giants, in addition to Wayne Gallman's touchdown. And on the defensive side of the ball, Jabril Peppers and Madre Harper were able to recover fumbles on the day. Blake Martinez led the Giants in tackles. He had 10 total tackles on the day. Jabril Peppers, their safety, in addition to the fumble recovery, he was also able to log 6 tackles for himself. And he finished with an interception on the day along with Logan Ryan and Blake Martinez. With this win, the New York Giants are now 2-7. And with this loss, the Washington football team now drops to 2-6, as only half a game separates the bottom 3 teams in the NFC East. In the Philadelphia Eagles, who are leading that division, they're only 3-4-1. But continuing on with these games, jumping out to Minneapolis, the Minnesota Vikings were able to take on the Detroit Lions and beat them 34-20 in this game. Matthew Stafford for the Detroit Lions with over 211 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. He would get subbed out for Chase Daniel, who completed 8 of his 13 passes, throwing for 94 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. The leading rusher for the Lions would end up being DeAndre Swift. He'd have 64 yards on 13 carries, and future Hall of Fame running back Adrian Peterson would log 29 yards on 8 carries. Through the air, Danny Amendola would finish with 77 yards on 7 receptions, leading the team. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Jamie Collins Sr. would lead the team in tackles. He'd have 9 of them on the day. Desmond Trufant, the former Atlanta corner, would finish with 6 tackles, and 1 of them being a sack on the day. And then their elite corner, Jeff Okudah, would finish with 2 total tackles on the day for the Detroit Lions. Looking at how the Minnesota Vikings fared, their quarterback, Kirk Cousins, would throw for 220 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their leading runner on the ground was Dalvin Cook, who had 206 yards and 22 carries and 2 touchdowns. Through the air, he also had 46 yards on 2 receptions. That would give him a total of 252 total yards of offense. Their leading receiver was Justin Jefferson, who had 64 yards on 3 receptions. And then Irv Smith would have 2 touchdowns for the Minnesota Vikings. He had 2 receptions for 10 yards. He would have a big game. On the defensive side of the ball, Eric Wilson would lead the team with 13 total tackles on the day, as he had half of a sack as well. Their elite safety, Harrison Smith, would finish with 10 total tackles on the day. And then through the air, or on the defense side of the ball, Eric Wilson, Harrison Smith, and Eric Kendricks were all responsible for logging an interception for their team. With this win, the Minnesota Vikings are now 3-5, and with this loss, the Detroit Lions are now 3-5, as they both share the worst record in the NFC North. And jumping out to Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Chargers lost to the Las Vegas Raiders 31-26 on the final play, might I say. As it came down to the very end, the Chargers had a goal line reviewing play at the very end, and he didn't get in. Very sad, but of course the Raiders would of course come up with a win. For the Chargers, their rookie quarterback Justin Herbert, who's been having a historic rookie season, by the way, despite the Chargers being 2-6, he was able to throw for 326 yards and 2 touchdowns. On the ground, Kalen Ballage would be their leading rusher. He had 69 yards on 15 carries and a touchdown. Through the air, Keenan Allen would finish with 103 yards on 9 receptions and a touchdown, and Mike Williams out of Clemson would finish with 81 yards and 5 receptions. On the defensive side of the ball, Jerry Tillery would pick up a fumble as he finished with 1 tackle on the day, being a strip sack. And then Rayshawn Jenkins would lead the team in tackles. He'd have 6 total tackles on the day. And looking at the Las Vegas Raiders, their quarterback Derek Carr would throw for 165 yards and 2 touchdowns on the day, as Devontae Booker would lead the way on the ground. He'd have 68 yards on 8 rushes and a touchdown, and also Josh Jacobs would also log 65 yards on 14 carries on the ground with a touchdown for himself. Hunter Renfrow would be the leading receiver for the Raiders, as he had 60 yards on 2 receptions, and Nelson Aguilar would have 55 yards on 2 receptions, with one of them being a touchdown, a 45-yarder. On the defensive side of the ball, Nick Kwiatkowski would finish with 13 tackles on the day. Sorry if I butchered his name. And then Lamarcus Joyner would finish with 12 tackles on the day, and Jonathan Abram would finish with 10. Big game from all those guys, as Max Crosby was able to log one of the 2 sacks on the day for the Raiders. Carl Nassib from Penn State logged the other. With this win, the Las Vegas Raiders are now 5-3 in the AFC West, as the Los Angeles Chargers now drop to 2-6, and yet, just like the Falcons, they're yet another team who finds a lot of miraculous or a lot of theatrical ways to lose. But right now, that's what that game was looking like. Jumping out to Dallas, the Dallas Cowboys hosted the Pittsburgh Steelers, and following a not very pretty win, the Pittsburgh Steelers remain undefeated after beating the Cowboys 24-19 after coming back and scoring 15 points in the fourth quarter after being down 19-9 at one point. Big win, of course, for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And looking at to how both teams fared, starting off with the Cowboys, their quarterback Garrett Gilbert would complete 21 of his 38 passes, throwing for 243 yards, a touchdown, and a pick in his first start for the Cowboys. On the ground, Tony Pollard would finish with 57 yards and 9 carries, and their elite running back Ezekiel Elliott would finish with 51 yards on 18 carries. Gary Gilbert was also able to add 28 yards on 3 carries. That would give him a total of 271 total yards of offense. And through the air, CeeDee Lamb would be the Cowboys' leading receiver. He had 71 yards on 4 receptions and a touchdown. Amari Cooper also had 67 yards on 5 receptions. Ezekiel Elliott had 18 yards through the air to give him 69 total yards of offense. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Trayvon Diggs and Jalen Smith would finish with 7 tackles each, as they were both playing incredibly well. The Cowboys were not able to log a single sack on the day, and that ended up hurting them in the end. Looking at how the Steelers fared, their quarterback Ben Roethlisberger would complete 29 of his 42 passes for 306 yards and 3 touchdowns. They were only able to get 46 yards of offense on the ground, but through the air, they were able to get it going. Juju Smith-Schuster, the former USC wide receiver, would finish with 93 yards on 6 receptions and a touchdown, as he led the team and the game in receiving yards. Also, Deontay Johnson had 77 yards on 6 receptions, and Chase Claypool had 69 yards on 8 receptions. On the defensive side of the ball, Minkah Fitzpatrick, their elite safety, was able to recover a fumble, as he had 6 total tackles on the day. Vince Williams led the team in tackles, as he had 8 of them and then continuing on, TJ Watt was able to log 1 tackle, one of them being for half of a sack, as the Steelers, along with Minkah Fitzpatrick's interception to go with his fumble recovery, they were able to pick up their 8th win of the season, and they are now 8-0 so far, as the Cowboys now drop to 2-7. They are now tied with the New York Giants for the worst record in the NFC East, and the Pittsburgh Steelers now retain the best record in the AFC, as they are the only remaining undefeated team as they are halfway through their season. Continuing on, jumping to Phoenix, the Arizona Cardinals hosted the Miami Dolphins, and the Dolphins were able to come up victorious, beating the Cardinals 34-31, as they were able to score 10 points in the fourth quarter to come back from down. Kyler Murray, the Arizona Cardinals quarterback, was able to throw for 283 yards as he completed 21 of his 26 passes and he threw for 3 touchdowns as well. He also ran for 106 total yards on 11 carries. That will give him 389 total yards of offense and 4 touchdowns. Chase Edmonds had 70 yards or 25 carries as well for the Cardinals. Through the air, Christian Kirk finished with 123 yards on 5 receptions and a touchdown. Future Hall of Famer Larry Fitzgerald finished with 54 yards and 4 receptions, and their elite wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins would finish with 30 yards on 3 receptions. On the defensive side of the ball, Jordan Hicks would finish with 7 total tackles on the day. Devondre Campbell, former Atlanta Falcon, would finish with 6 tackles on the day, one of them being a sack, and their elite corner Patrick Peterson would finish with 6 total tackles on the day. Hassan Reddick would finish with 2.5 tackles on the day for the team as well. And continuing on, looking at how the Miami Dolphins fared. Their elite rookie quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, in his second start for the Miami Dolphins, he was able to complete 20 of his 28 passes, throwing for 248 yards and 2 touchdowns on the day. And of course, one of his touchdowns coming in the fourth quarter to Mac Hollins to tie the game up with Arizona, and he was also able to lead Miami down the field to get the game-winning field goal. Big game for him. On the ground, Salvon Ahmed finished with 38 yards and 7 carries. Tua Tagovailoa was able to add 35 yards on the ground, no touchdowns, and that would officially give him 283 total yards of offense. And then through the air, Devontae Parker would be the leading receiver. He had 64 yards on 6 receptions, and Preston Williams had 60 yards on 4 receptions, one of his receptions being a touchdown for the Dolphins. And Shaq Lawson on the defensive side was able to recover a fumble as he was able to log 3 tackles as well. Jerome Baker would lead the team with 7 tackles. And with this win, the Miami Dolphins are now 5-3 on the season. And with this win, they are now second in the AFC East behind the Buffalo Bills. And right with this loss, the Arizona Cardinals now dropped to 1 full game behind the Seattle Seahawks as they are now 5-3, tied with the Los Angeles Rams with that record. And then jumping to the last game of the night, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers hosted the New Orleans Saints, and the Saints were able to beat them 38-3 as they kind of embarrassed the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who up until this point have looked like one of the stronger, formidable contenders in the NFC. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, their go-to quarterback, Tom Brady, would complete 2 of his 38 passes, throwing for 290 yards and 3 interceptions. On the ground, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were only able to log 8 rushing yards on 5 carries. And through the air, Mike Evans would be their leading receiver. Their elite wide receiver finished with 64 yards on 4 receptions. And Antonio Brown, their new elite wide receiver in his first game with the Buccaneers, finished with 31 yards and 3 receptions. On the defensive side of the ball, they would recover 2 fumbles. Levante David, in addition to his 7 tackles and tackle for loss, he finished with 1 fumble recovery on the day. And Mike Edwards would finish with a recovered fumble on the day. Their young linebacker, Devin White, would finish with 14 total tackles on the day as well. And just going on, they would have a pretty good defensive outing, but it just wouldn't be enough. For the New Orleans Saints, their go-to quarterback, Drew Brees, would complete 26 of his 32 passes, throwing for 222 yards and 4 total touchdowns on the day. On the ground, Taysom Hill will be their leading rusher. He had 54 yards and 7 carries. To go with his 48 yards of passing, he would finish with a total of 102 total yards on the day. Alvin Kamara would also finish with 40 yards on 9 carries of the day with a rushing touchdown, and that would go on to add with his 9 yards to the air. That would give him 49 yards of total offense. Their leading receiver was Michael Thomas, who had 51 yards and 5 receptions in his first game back from injury. And continuing on, looking at the defensive side of the ball, Malcolm Jenkins and Demario Davis would both lead the teams with 2 tackles each. And continuing on there, Trey Hendrickson would finish with 3 tackles, and 2 of his tackles being sacks. David Onyemata, Malcolm Jenkins, and Marcus Williams would each log an interception for the New Orleans Saints. And with this win, the New Orleans Saints are now 6-2 in the NFC South, as they now take a half a game lead over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And with this loss, like I said, the Buccaneers are now 6-3 on the season with this win. And that is basically what happened in the NFL. And jumping into today's Monday night matchup, this matchup will be between the 2-5 New England Patriots and the 0-8 New York Jets. The Jets have yet to win a game, and the Patriots are looking to turn things around, especially with their quarterback Cam Newton, who's only thrown 2 touchdowns on the season. This game will be on at 8:15 on ESPN. And with that said, I appreciate you for listening to all 43 minutes of my piece. This weekend was incredibly eventful, and following today's matchup, of course, I'll do a couple updates in the NFL as we have reached the midway point of the NFL. But of course, with that said, once again, thank you for listening to all 43 minutes of my piece. I'm James Sims, this is The Elite. It is Monday, November 9th, 2020. I hope all is well, and I will get back to you tomorrow with tomorrow's sporting updates. With that said, I want to thank you once again, and peace out.